She wasn't on the crew list, didn't wear wings, just a quiet mechanic with grease on her hands. What incredible secret lies within? But when the pilot collapsed midair, and no one else moved, she stepped into the cockpit and said, "I know this bird, let me fly." No training badge, no command, just calm hands and a perfect landing. She asked for nothing. But the aircraft and everyone aboard remembered. This is the story of Maya Langley and the day a mechanic flew them home. Welcome to Graceful Valor. Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. It was just past 0600 when the hangar lights flickered on at Peterson Air Base, just south of Fort Collins, Colorado. Frost clung to the windows, the tarmac shimmered in the early cold. Inside Hangar 3, a team of mechanics moved with practiced ease, tightening bolts, running checklists, finishing up a 3-day repair on an aging C-130 transport. Maya Langley stood quietly at the edge of it all, oil-streaked. Her jumpsuit, her gloves were off, but her hands were still stained with hydraulic fluid. She didn't talk much, didn't need to. Everyone in that hangar knew when a system went quiet for reasons no one else could explain. They called Maya. At 32, she had spent nearly half her life inside aircraft, first in the Air Force, then in civilian aerospace. She didn't wear wings, she didn't chase flight hours, but she could hear when an engine was about to cough before the warning lights even blinked. That morning, command tapped her for a final systems check. Midair, the repair was done, but the aircraft had shown strange behavior during ground tests. They needed someone sharp to ride along, just in case. She didn't argue. They gave her a headset, a clipboard, no seat assignment, just the jump seat in the rear bait. She strapped in, ran her own checklist in silence, and waited. No one looked twice at her. She wasn't on the manifest, not technically part of the flight crew, just a civilian tech in a grease-marked suit, logging notes like always. But Maya wasn't watching the scenery. Her eyes were locked on the instrument feed, monitoring every pressure line, every signal pattern, especially the oxygen distribution system. 18 minutes after takeoff, something flickered. First, a soft chirp in the upper left corner of the feed, then an anomaly on the pilot's O2 regulator. It was subtle, half a second delay. Then the alarm lit up red. She sat up straighter. No one moved from her seat. Maya saw the pilot slump forward, one hand still on the throttle. His head hit the control yoke with a sickening thud. The co-pilot froze, cabin pressures dropping. Someone shouted from mid-bait. Panic rippled through the aircraft. Then came the order. No one passed the cockpit line. It wasn't barked in anger, just protocol, a sharp line drawn in emergency procedure. No unauthorized access, no civilians allowed forward of frame 245. But Maya had already unclipped her harness. She didn't speak, didn't shout. She walked slow and steady past the bulkhead, past the warning stripe, past the line. Her hand brushed the co-pilot's shoulder. "I know this bird," she said softly. "Let me fly." For a beat, nothing moved. Then the co-pilot stepped back. His eyes said everything: confusion, desperation, and trust too. Strangely somehow, because Maya's voice didn't waver, her hands didn't shake. She looked at the controls the way you'd look at an old friend, one you hadn't seen in years, but still remembered by heart. Outside, the aircraft tilted slightly starboard, the horizon line dipped. Inside, lights flickered across the panel. Can this mechanic save the day? Maya took the left seat. It wasn't meant for her, but in that moment, it was the only seat she could take. She didn't hesitate. Her fingers found the trim adjust, then the pressure valves, then the emergency override panel. The C-130 responded like it had been waiting for her, down in the rear bay. No one spoke, no one moved. Even the engineer who had spent 2 years watching her solve impossible faults stood frozen. He had seen her rebuild engines from memory, calibrate diagnostics by ear, but he had never seen her here in the cockpit, holding the yoke like it belonged to her, like she'd held it all along. Back in the hangar, Maya had always moved in silence, always fixed what was broken before anyone else even noticed it was. Now, she was doing the same thing, only this time, it wasn't just parts at stake, it was lives. And though her name wasn't on the flight log and she didn't wear wings or stripes or stars, every person on that aircraft suddenly knew they were no longer waiting for help. Help had already taken the seat and she wasn't letting go. ChatGPT said. Mia's hands moved with quiet precision. She adjusted cabin pressure first, just enough to stabilize oxygen flow, then eased the throttle back, steadying the aircraft's descent. The altimeter crept upward again, then held stable, level. The co-pilot, still tense beside her, watched without a word. His fingers hovered near the radio, but communications had already gone dark. Electrical interference from the oxygen system failure had scrambled their signal. They were flying blind, without tower clearance, in restricted airspace. But Maya wasn't guessing. She knew the layout of Peterson Air Base like the lines of her own hand. She had stood on that runway for years, watching landings, listening to chatter, studying every variable she wasn't supposed to. Now she drew from memory: wind direction, field elevation, approach pattern, fuel reserves. This wasn't theory to her, this was survival. She reached for the rudder trim, tapped twice, listened for the mechanical response. The aircraft answered, slow, compliant, steady. The co-pilot finally spoke. "We've got no vector, what are you doing?" Maya didn't look up. Lining us up for runway 21, he blinked. That's correct for our heading. I know, the C-130 wasn't an easy aircraft to land. It was massive, stubborn, forgiving only when handled with respect, and Maya had shown it nothing but respect for over a decade. She had rebuilt this exact plane from the ground up, replaced its hydraulic lines, recalibrated its sensors, knew how the trim tabs reacted in crosswind, knew how the left engine always hesitated 2 degrees off center throttle. This wasn't flying by instinct, it was flying by experience, years of turning wrenches, late nights running diagnostics, quiet hours alone in the hangar learning how the machine breathed. Now she was breathing with it. She adjusted descent rate, cross-checked fuel pressure, monitored torque imbalance on engine 3, just enough to compensate manually, and still, she said nothing. The silence in the cockpit wasn't fear, it was focus. Below them, the airfield came into view. The base still had no idea who was flying their bird. The tower couldn't see the pilot's face, only the aircraft, now steady and aligned, moving exactly as it should. Back in the rear bay, the engineer whispered under his breath, "She's actually flying it." No one replied. The medical tech was still working on the unconscious pilot, checking vitals, trying to stabilize oxygen levels, but all eyes kept drifting forward to the cockpit, to Maya. She hadn't trained to be here, but she had trained for this. During her years in the Air Force, Maya had spent countless hours in flight simulators, not because she wanted to fly, but because she believed a better mechanic understood the machine from every angle. Emergency protocols, failure scenarios, recovery drills, she'd studied them all quietly, methodically, obsessively, because her father once told her, "If you understand every bolt, you'll know how to land it." Now she was proving him right. Can this quiet resolve rewrite her destiny? At 500 feet, Maya took full control. Her eyes narrowed, her breath slowed, her hands held steady. The runway grew larger in the windshield. The glide path was perfect. She didn't reach for luck, she reached for flaps, throttle, trim, reverse thrust on standby. The C-130 descended like it had been flown 1,000 times, like it knew it was safe with her. At 50 feet, Maya made one last adjustment. The main gear touched down, smooth, straight, center line. The aircraft rolled to a gentle stop, engines humming, systems holding, no alarms. Outside, a line of ground crew stood frozen. They had seen the blacked-out comms, knew something had gone wrong, but none of them expected to see her in the cockpit. Maya powered down the engines, switched off auxiliary systems, ran through the shutdown checklist from memory, every button, every step, perfect. When the hatch opened, the air was cold, crisp, the silence was louder than any siren. Maya stepped down last, her boots hit the tarmac like she belonged there. Her jumpsuit still carried the scent of oil and ozone, her belt still held a wrench. She didn't wear a headset anymore, but every person on the line knew exactly who had brought that aircraft home, and not one of them said a word. No one clapped when Maya stepped off the aircraft. There were no sirens, no applause, just the hiss of cooling engines and the hum of ground vehicles slowly returning to motion. She didn't wait for questions, didn't look for recognition. She picked up her tools, wiped the oil from her palms, and walked back toward Hangar 3 like it was just another Tuesday. Inside, the shop was quiet. The usual banter was gone. Mechanics looked her way, then quickly turned back to their work. No one knew what to say. She wasn't supposed to be in that seat, wasn't trained for it, wasn't certified, but the plane was on the ground and everyone aboard was alive. Later that evening, the pilot finally regained consciousness. They said his oxygen levels had dropped too fast, his system couldn't recover. When the doctor told him he'd blacked out mid-flight, the first thing he asked was who flew us back. They gave him a name, Maya Langley. He went quiet, then smiled to himself. "I'm glad she was there, that was it." No ceremony, no formal write-up. Just a sentence carried on in the med bay, half whispered and honest. The next day, command reviewed the cockpit footage. A single fixed camera had recorded everything from the moment the alarm flashed to the second the wheels kissed the runway. They watched Maya step into frame, watched her take the controls with calm hands and steady breath. 12 seconds, that's how long it took her to stabilize the aircraft after the pilot went down. 12 seconds to correct trim, equalize pressure, re-establish trajectory. Not one movement wasted, no panic, no guesswork, just knowledge. At the end of the clip, the co-pilot could be heard muttering under his breath, "She flew it like she's done it her whole life." The footage never left the base. It wasn't uploaded, wasn't shared, but those who saw it knew what they'd witnessed, and a few couldn't stay quiet. One message appeared in the command inbox that afternoon. It was from the co-pilot. The subject line read, "Reflight 127, incident formal statement." The body was short, "If I'm flying again, I want her in the seat next to me." That line was forwarded, then archived, and then quietly without announcement, Maya Langley's name was added to a list. Not a list for mechanics, not for maintenance crew. It was the pre-screening roster for the civilian flight command transition program, an internal path designed for veterans and specialists with potential, people who'd proven they had what it took in the field. Maya never asked to be on it, she never even saw the email, but someone upstairs did, and they remembered. Still down in Hangar 3, nothing changed. Maya showed up the next morning like always, same jumpsuit, same boots, Same quiet focus. She had already started diagnosing the oxygen system from the night before, disassembling valve 3B, checking for particulate blockage. No one approached her directly, but when the engineering chief passed by, he paused. "I heard about what happened," he said. Maya didn't look up. "It's fixed now." Wasn't the sensor, it was a pressure bleed from the regulator chamber. He nodded slowly. "Still, that landing, most trained pilots wouldn't have managed it under calm's blackout." She gave a small shrug. "The systems did what they were supposed to. I just listened." He smiled faintly, then walked on. That was all the conversation they needed that night. Maya sat alone in the back of the hangar. She was writing. Her notebook rested on her knee, the one she used to track system anomalies, fault patterns, maintenance notes, but this page was different. At the top, she wrote Flight 127, Oxygen Failure Cascade, Midair Recovery Protocol Validation. She underlined the word validation twice because for the first time her quiet preparation had been tested and it held. No one gave her a ribbon, no plaque, but someone did update the base manifest. Archive: Flight 127 Mechanical Incident Cause Oxygen System Fault Mitigation Recovery by Maintenance Specialist Maya Langley, and beneath that, someone typed a single sentence. She didn't hold a title, just the aircraft. The days rolled on quietly after Flight 127, no headlines, no press briefings, just the usual hum of base life, the clatter of tool carts, the hiss of pneumatic drills, the low roar of engines warming on the line, and Maya Langley. She showed up every morning like nothing had changed, still wore the same faded jumpsuit, still carried that old canvas belt with rusted clips, still walked with that calm, grounded purpose that made people step out of her way without realizing why. She didn't talk about the flight, didn't mention the cockpit or the co-pilot's message or the line someone typed into the base manifest. She just kept working. Then one Thursday, something arrived in the mailroom, a small padded envelope. No return address, just her name, block letters, neat and centered. Inside, wrapped in brown cloth, was a single flight patch, black border, faint silver stitching at the center, an embroidered silhouette of a C-130 in descent. Below it, for simple words, Bird 127 landed by ML. Maya held it for a long time, ran her thumb along the edge, felt the weight of it, not heavy but honest. She didn't pin it to her jumpsuit, didn't frame it on a wall. Instead, she opened her toolbox, the one she'd carried since her first year out of the Air Force, the one with her father's initials carved inside the lid. She pinned it there on the underside of the lid where no one would see it but her. The next morning, she was back under another aircraft, flat on her back, tightening bolts near the wing struts, half listening to a new tech arguing with a torque gauge. The kid was maybe 21, his sharp eyes, nervous hands. "Hey, Maya," he called out. "Yeah." He leaned closer. "Is it true that you landed a bird mid-flight?" She didn't answer right away, just kept working, tightening one more bolt, then another. Finally, she sat up and wiped her hands on a rag. "I didn't land it for the glory," she said. "I landed it because someone had to." The kid looked down, then asked, almost hesitant, "So, why haven't you signed up for the command program? You've already proven you can fly." Maya paused. She glanced toward the hangar doors out toward the runway where another C-130 was taxiing into the sunlight. "I already did," she said quietly, "just not on paper." The kid didn't know what to say to that. But he didn't need to. From that day on, word traveled, not loudly, not in memos or bulletins, but in the spaces between wrenches and coffee breaks, in the way people looked at her, in the quiet nods from pilots passing through the bay. They stopped calling her Langley the mechanic, they started calling her something else, the one who kept the C-130 alive. It wasn't a title, it wasn't official, but somehow it meant more because it wasn't about promotion or status or flight hours logged. It was about trust, the kind that can't be bought, can't be taught, can only be earned in moments no one expects you to survive. Maya never spoke of that flight again. She didn't need to. The aircraft remembered, and so did the people. They watched her walk the hangar floor each morning, calm, steady, quiet as ever, still fixing what others couldn't, still listening to the machine the way others read checklists. And every now and then, when a new recruit asked about the woman in Bay 6, the one with the oil-stained gloves and the eyes that missed nothing, someone would answer with a simple smile, "That's Maya, she doesn't wear wings, but the sky knows her name." In our darkest moments, kindness still finds a way, often in the quietest places. Not everyone who helps wants recognition, some just need to know that today someone isn't going hungry, and sometimes that alone is enough to change a life. You may forget the story, but if no one retells it, history stays silent forever. Subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories, where justice is honored, kindness is remembered, and no act of quiet heroism is ever lost.